Hi, Iveth. Ashley here. I enjoyed watching your video, and I agree. I think I said the same thing in the beginning of mine. It was really challenging to establish the type of theory that was being used within the video, but I also chose REB therapy as well. For number one, the thinking and behaving goals that were established, mine are very parallel with yours. I uh, identified the same things. But one thing I really liked about the way that it was done was how he first said, like, what are you thinking? And then he said, well, what are you going to remember? So it was like, it wasn't, it was more specified to what was important, right? What was important of this situation. And when she told him, she told him about, she's going to remember that he was sabotaging the relationship, and that she was going to talk to her counselor about it. And he said, so you kind of have a plan, right? So you have this plan. Now, what are you going to do? So he kind of, he's kind of established that goal of what are you specifically going to do now that you have this plan and this thinking, or what you're going to remember, or what are you going to do about it? So I liked that it wasn't necessarily like, what are you thinking? How are you going to behave differently? And so that brings me to number two with like the type of therapy that was being used. Well, with behavior therapy, it's all about the behavior, right? It's changing the behavior. And from the video, it doesn't really seem like he was trying to change her behavior. He wanted to know about like what were the thoughts behind that? What else is there, and what can you do from there? And when she said she was going to let him go or try to let him go, he wasn't trying to fully shift that. He was saying like he recognized that she wasn't quite ready and it was tentative, but that was the best that she could do right now, right? So there wasn't this necessarily like, this is what you have to do, this is how you have to behave. It's like working with what she had. And then I didn't think it was person-centered because he was asking a lot of questions, and it seemed at one point that he had kind of like, based on how she said, I'm going to remember what you said about him self-sabotaging, it seemed at one point he had kind of given her feedback towards this person sabotaging the relationship. And with person-centered, it's like the therapist doesn't really, or the counselor doesn't necessarily give that kind of feedback. It's kind of just like an ebb and flow, and it's like you go on this journey together and you're not providing any advice, or you're not asking questions. So I was right there with you in the sense of thinking it was the REB therapy, and how you had said something, he was giving her the power to change the situation and how she was going to do it, and noticing that she has all of these other things going on in her life that would be supportive of her letting him go. So yeah, number three, how would you use this approach in your work as a school counselor? You talked about having the kids set positive goals, helping them maintain like a positive self-image through self-esteem, and helping identify the positivity within themselves. And I completely agree with that. I think with these self-defeating beliefs, there's a lot of, that's just a perspective, that's a lens that these kids are bringing to the table that needs to be adjusted, right? Or shifted. And working on self-esteem, and the I cans and the I do's and I am instead of the I'm not, is a great place to start with these kids, or with any kids. That shift in perspective makes room for so much more, from that self-defeating to irrational to irrational to rational, is really powerful. And I think even for adults, it's true as well. So doing that with like group settings or one-on-one, working on the self-esteem, working on positive self-image, and finding that within themselves and not having to be told that from somebody else. That's really key and really powerful, is recognizing that here. Um, and then, yeah, it's just recognizing that here. I feel like that's like the key point that I really liked what you said. For the things that would be difficult, you talked about the pushback from kids and opening up without establishing a relationship. Absolutely. I think, which that statement leads to my difficulty that I thought was the time that it would take, right? Because this is not just going to be like a 6-week session and here we go. Your self-defeating beliefs are out the window and you're a rational thinker. I think something like this takes time and takes consistent practice and revisiting those beliefs and not pushing them out, but re-challenging them over and over again. There's this book that I read, I think it's called The 4 Elements of Change. And it talks about how our beliefs are like dirty laundry, right? So you can wash them and you can clean them, but they kind of always come back, and they might always be ingrained. And this is just something I've read and how I'm applying it in this thought process. But we're always going to have to revisit and kind of work through that and work on it and shift it. And so that shift in perspective, that shift in lens, that shift from irrational to rational is something that's going to be a continuous process. So it's something that might take time. So establishing that relationship and getting that pushback is going to be there, and we're going to need time to work on it. As far as the easy part, the kids want to be praised, they want to feel better, and they feel accomplished and they have a self-esteem. And I'm right there with you. I think that once that relationship is established and once the opening up starts to begin, I think it's challenging sometimes, but I do think there's like a connection, and you're on a process, you're on a journey to begin and flow with it. And there's a trust that's built, and it allows that trust allows for growth, and it allows for change. And then the last question was, which one would be most effective at your grade level? And you chose REV for high school. And I am talking about how lowering the frustration, increasing the resilience, the tolerance, especially with high schools getting ready to go into like a high school students getting ready to go into a career or college. I think that is imperative. That's incredibly necessary and valuable and important for those kids to feel that sense of self-worth, self-esteem, a good sense of self-esteem and self-efficacy, because they're going to be independent. They're going to be pushed out into this world where it's not as pretty or as easy as I think people think it is. And so I do think that REV is something that could be definitely utilized. And I said the same thing at working at the elementary school. I think that starting those habits and starting that type of shift in perspective or shift in lens would be really valuable when they're young, because these things, those beliefs that they have, if they continue to believe them, it's going to become ingrained in their like core beliefs, and those are hard to change. It's challenging and it's frustrating, and as I said, like those beliefs tend to like kind of maybe come up or are challenged again at some point or another. And so working through that and recognizing how to shift from irrational to rational, or changing that perspective, that lens is really valuable, I think, all throughout, especially, starting. And so I think starting at the young age where they have the practice of doing it would be really helpful in the high school, career also, or in the high school counseling sessions also, of working with those kids and sending them out into the world. But great video. I enjoyed watching, and I hope you have a great Sunday.